Chemo, we're just getting set up, just had a little connection issue. If you have any issues with the sound, let me know. And if you have any issues with the images, let me know, because we had something, well, actually, Zoom had a problem last week. So just let me know. And give me a second, I wanna pull something up. Okay, hold on one second. I just have to pull up a couple of things. We were having a little connection issue. So first of all, Chiamo, greetings, Yedase, for everyone tuning in. Let me know if you can see these images as I begin to pull them up. Let me know if you can, or if you can't see the images, let me know. You should be able to see the dictionary. Or somebody in the chat room, let me know if you were able to see that.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Okay, good. So first, let me I was trying to use it on pull up something on a different computer, but it didn't work. So we'll do it this way. All right. Okay, so once again, yet I'll say, appreciate everyone for joining in with regard to the class. And this is a different class. So coming up September 23rd, that is the first full day of the Atem and Atemet Equinox, which for us is the first full day of our new year. So the equinox is actually September 22nd, around 3:40 p.m. or something like that. But when the sun rises on September 22nd, the equinox has not yet occurred. And it doesn't occur until later in the afternoon, a few hours before sunset. So the first full day of the period of the Atem Atemet equinox, the fall equinox, autumn equinox, and so forth, is September 23rd this year. So for us, within Akwamu Mine Marukai Tifibu, the Akwamu Nation in North America, and as Akan people in North America, that is our New Year's Day. And we have a 7-day observance leading up to the 23rd, which is our New Year's Day. So this particular year, September 17th through September 23rd, will be our 7-day New Year observance, which we call Obrajira. And since we're talking about it like that, let me just pull this up. Just to give you some background. So on our page, on our website, you can see the Apo and Obrajira page. Apo occurs in March. So we'll scroll down. Obrajira Nananom Som. So many Akan people on the continent celebrate the New Year around the months of August or September, October. Those who've been brainwashed celebrate the New Year on January 1st at the dead of winter when everything is dark and cold and so forth. That is not the beginning of a new cycle at all. That's the European pseudo New Year. But for us, around August, September, October, traditionally on the continent for Akan people and certain other groups as well. So here in North America, our Nananoma and Samanpo directed us to establish it that revolves around the Atem Atemet or autumn equinox. And there are some on the continent, as we said, August, September, or October. Sometimes it shifts for them. So many of them are celebrating around September as well. So, but the New Year is called Ojira. Ojira in Akan means purification. But we also find in our Nsamanfo let us know and directed us to this information that Ojira, or Jira meaning purification, or to celebrate a ceremony of purification in the Akan language, it is not just an Akan term. So, just so you can see that, we'll look at the Ojira Mind page right quick on the site. And in fact, just so you can see the entry in the dictionary, we will pull up the book itself. Okay, just want to make sure everybody can see this. All right, so we're pulling up our book, Ojiraman Afashe, one of the journals for our Ojiraman conference. So you will see that we have, I'm going to show you the entry from the Akan, the tree, Akan dictionary, the word Ojira. And should be in here. Hold on a second. And actually, it might be on the other page. Let's see. If it's not on here, let's see. Actually, it's not on this one, so we'll just pull up the Asante Fanti dictionary so you can see it that way. And I want to pull that up just so you can see the direct evidence of that. Pull that down. And again, if you have, for those who just came in, if you're new, if you don't see the images, just let me know so we can correct that. All right, so here's the dictionary. And just so you can see how we went about this and how we were given this information. So Akan people celebrate, many Akan people, not all groups, but many Akan people in the Akwamu region and so forth, and the Sonan people in the Ojeda region, Edruda region, in the Sefwi region and so forth, they celebrate the New Year around September. Now, you said the New Year is Ojeda, so we're going to pull up the term Jida to see what it means here first. Then we'll show you what the nsuo showed us. So in the Asante Fanti dictionary, this dictionary written back in the so-called 1800s, compiled rather. So all right, so you can see here the term jira, to dash, strike against, spatter, sprinkle, to cleanse from guilt or moral or religious uncleanness, to sanctify, to consecrate. And that's the definition dealing with purification, to sanctify, to consecrate, and so forth. Also to dedicate. Now, Ojira, the yam custom, celebrating the, the new yam and so forth, an annual festival celebrated in the month of August or September when the first yam is eaten, being considered also the beginning of a new year. And then it says, Wochwa, Ojira, Wa, Kumase, Akwam, Akurapong. And that's saying they celebrate Chwa Jida, meaning to celebrate or cut, or to Chwa Jida, celebrate Jida. They celebrate Ojira, Wochwa, they celebrate Jida within Kumasi, within Akwam, with the Akwamu region, Akurapong region, and so forth. So it means to cleanse, to clean, to purify, purification. It also a ceremony of purification, which for us is the 7-day New Year. And here's one of the idioms: if a dwelling has become defiled, it is purified. Obikum fi a wajiram. If one makes a dwelling ceremonially unclean, it is purified, and so forth. That's one of the sayings and so forth. So jira means to purify. We also utilize the ajira leaf plant. That's a sacred plant from Ghana, but we can use other plants here and so forth. We utilize that to cleanse jira, the physical head, and also the spiritual head, the akra, the soul, the divine consciousness, the divinity in the head region. So it means purification. It means to celebrate a ceremony of purification. The miniature or mini ceremony is the cleansing of the head with the jira plant, but the major ceremony is the New Year observance, 7-day New Year observance that takes place in September or August, but for us, September, for Akan people who celebrate Ojira. Now, so on our poll page, that's what we're saying. And we say Ojira is celebrated for 7 days in some areas, 40 days in other areas, but typically 7 days. We said Ojira is a term meaning purification. At the end of one cycle year and the beginning of a new cycle, you end one cycle and you're beginning the new cycle. The end of the warm season, which is spring and summer, then there's a crossing point, and then you go into the cool season and so forth. The ends of the year have met, end of one cycle, beginning of the next cycle. So when that happens, it behooves us to take, stock of what has taken place in that warm cycle, and then go into the new, cool, reflective, contemplative cycle with a new, clean, purified focus. So this is why we have purification at the end of this cycle, the beginning of the new cycle. So we purify ourselves physically and spiritually. And we say reestablish the values of our ancestral culture, and rededicate ourselves individually and as an Akurakani Afraikani community to our individual and collective Nkrabia, our divine function. So once again, to rededicate ourselves, that's why Jira means to dedicate, but dedication for us means to purify. Now, Art and Samafo showed us, first and foremost, they directed us to establish or reinstitute our sacred 7-day New Year observance back in 13,001, which is so-called 2001. So this year, 13,021, is the 20th anniversary of us reinstituting or reestablishing our 7-day Ojira Akan Ancestral Observance, our New Year observance, purification observance. So they directed us to do that and calibrated specifically to the days leading up, the 6 days leading up to the 7th day, which is the equinox. On the continent, they have a way of, calculating it, and it shifts a little bit each year, but it's still around the same time. But since we are in the Western Hemisphere, there's a marked shift between summer and then going into, fall and into winter, even with going from hot to then the leaves are falling to winter, and you have snow, and then you have spring and so forth, and the leaves come back. There's a big shift in energy that we can witness, and we can take stock of, and we can experience. It's a little bit different if you're living near the equator and all year round is warm. They have rainy seasons and they have the Harmattan and so forth, but it is a big difference to go from extremely hot, 100 degrees outside, to living in a place like Chicago is 20 degrees below zero and so forth. There's a marked shift, and we can feel that shift happening on Earth. And as things begin to shift, we take advantage of that shift in energy so we can purify ourselves and go into that next cycle pure and focused. So that's what we did, we established it. But Art and Samafo showed us that the term Ojira, just like the term Akan and the language itself, is not simply an Akan term. It's an ancient Akan term, and the ancient Akan people, or ancient Akan Fo, are the people of Kanat, the Kan land, first land, foremost land, land of the beginning. That is a title of ancient Nubia, the Kan land, the first land, foremost land. The people of Kan or Kanat, the Kanit people, are the ancient Nubians, and some of them migrated to Kemet and established Kemet. Some stayed in Nubia, Sudan, and so forth, and eventually migrated to the western part of the continent. So when you look at the language of ancient Kanit, Nubia, and Kemet, you should be able to find the various terms you find in the Akan dictionary, because it's the same language that we preserved in our blood circles. Our Nsamafo showed us that. First, they told us that at the ancestral shrine, and then they directed us to evidence of that. So we began to flesh out that evidence. They told us to establish Ojira, and we established Ojira as our 7-day observance. And then after we did that, they directed us to information that confirmed. So when you look in the hieroglyphic dictionary, the Medutu and so forth, you'll see that the term TWRA or DWR and so forth, which is Jira, as we pronounce it in Akan, in ancient Kemet, as you can see in the Medutu, it means to clean, to cleanse, to purify. Jira means to clean, to cleanse, to purify. And Akan, it means the same thing in ancient Kemet. It also means to celebrate a ceremony of purification. So we have both definitions. It means to purify, to cleanse, to clean, ritually. It also means to celebrate a ceremony of purification. And we know what that ceremony is. We know what the individual ceremony is, to cleanse and clean the spiritual head, and also to cleanse the entire community through Ojira as the new year. So when they directed us to establish that and reinstitute it within our clans and our Omai and our nation, they gave us the confirmation through the language and so forth. So we go into some detail about that and about the language and so forth. So now we're talking about, for us, the beginning of the year is the Atem and Atemet equinox, the autumn equinox. That is the end of one cycle, the beginning of a new cycle. Many people will say, well, why don't you begin the new year in spring when everything is sprouting and new? Spring is a revelation of what took place in autumn. Cosmologically, when the sun sets in the west, it's akin to a seed being planted in the ground. The sun sets in the west, it goes in the quote unquote underworlds, in the underworld for the 12 hours of the night, in the darkness and so forth, and then it springs up into the sky at dawn. The fall is akin to the evening point when the sun is setting and so forth. That's akin to fall. Then it goes into the underworld, the darkness during the wintertime and so forth. Some winter solstice around December 20th, 21st. And then at spring, then the sun re-emerges and begins, to get warmer and so forth on Earth and so forth. And then you have summer, the full flowering, the hot weather and everything else. So when the sun sets in the west, in the evening, it goes into the quote unquote underworld, just like a seed, a seed inside of a plant. If you have inside fruit and so forth, fruit falls, that's akin to fall. The fruits are falling off the plants and we harvest them and so forth. So the fall is the harvest time. You're harvesting the fruits of your labor and so forth. You're eating the first yam and so forth. But then you take the seeds out of the fruit. So you harvest, you take the seeds out of the fruit, plant them. So the harvest time is also the planting time, the seeding time. So that is a conception. When the seed goes into the earth, that is akin to conception, just like a man and woman conceiving, the seed being, the woman being fertilized, the egg being fertilized and so forth. That is conception. That's the beginning of life. Then the birth is a revelation of what took place during the conception. The spring is just a revelation of what took place at conception and what was going on in the underworld. So the beginning is the conception. The halfway point is the birth and so forth. This is why we have the beginning of the year at the conception point. Now, so that's what we're talking about on that part. Now let's switch back. So on our flyer, you'll see that Afe, that's the term for year in Akan. And we talk about the first full day is Atem, Atemet, Equinox, and so forth. So this sacred cycle of conception, seeding, rooting, germination, and so forth, sprouting around the spring equinox, full flowering around the summer solstice in June and so forth, and then the fall is when you harvest the fruits of your labor, harvest time and also seeding time. Now, and we also mentioned, of course, the fact that we're in the midst of a 26,000 year cycle. So hence the years beginning with 13,000. There was no character named Jesus, Yeshua, Isa, and so forth, or Muhammad, or any of these other fictional cartoon characters. So we don't track time based on fictional characters. Nothing was happening 2,000 years ago. So we're in the midst of a 26,000 year astronomical cycle. So we're in 13,021. And our new year begins September 23rd, which will be 13,022 on that day. Now, we said the names of the seasons inaugurated by the equinoxes and solstices, autumn, winter, spring, and summer, are derived from the Abosom, the deities, Atem and Atemet, Urtu and Urt titles, Khepri, Kheprit, Shemu and Shemut, and so forth. These deities govern the four elements: nsuo, water, asaase, earth, mframa, air, ogya, fire, in relation to the year cycle and the elemental purification within our planets. And this has always been part of the Hoodoo tradition. We show that elemental structure right there. Let's show a portion of that, and then we're going to get into the names of some of these divinities. Get that. So fact, you know what? Let's switch over first to the. I'm going to come out of this one. We're going to go to the other document. Hold on a second. Okay. So first and foremost, let's look at these titles. And we will also look at the Atem Online Dictionary just so we can show what we're talking about here. Now, looking at etymology dictionary, Atem Online, one of the many etymology dictionaries. You see the term autumn. Second. Now, talking about, of course, season after summer, before winter, and so forth. It says from Latin, autumnus, which is of unknown origin, according to them. Perhaps from Etruscan, but Tucker suggests the meaning drying up season, and the root in "ok," which of course is not accurate. And then it says, although summer, winter, and spring are inherited Indo-European words in Latin, a foreign origin of autumnus is conceivable since we cannot reconstruct the PIE word for autumn. So they don't know the origin of the term autumn, but it is, they do know it's the time of the fall, the end of the summer, before winter, and so forth. Now, we have the actual origins, and when you look at these origins of European terms, they're typically corruptions of terms from our language. If you look in the language of ancient Kemet, Atem is a divinity. The female counterpart of Atem is Atemet. And we actually have a book where we go into some detail on that cosmology. So let's pull up that book and see what we have in that book. And when you go on our publications page, you will see all of our 31 books that you can download for free. And we were showing in this book that in Akan, the name of the deity, Odumankoma, is Atemu Kopa, which is Atemu Kopa, Atem Kepra in ancient Kemet. And we were also showing that Tridriampong in Akan is Chedera, which is a title of Kepra, the beetle, in ancient Kemet. So we were talking about Atem. And this is one of the images of the deity Atem, and sometimes they will spell it Atum, which is autumn. Now, what does autumn have to do with the fall? We said fall, of course, is the leaves falling, the fruits falling from the trees. You capture the fruits and so forth, and you harvest and so forth, and that's the end of the warm cycle. That's the fall, but also just like the summertime is the hottest time, summer solstice, June 21st, 22nd, and so forth. And then it starts getting cool and less sunlight by the time the sun, is falling towards the, autumn period and so forth. In the day cycle, the summer or the hottest time is noon, and then the fall is the evening point. And then the winter is akin to midnight, and then the sunrise is akin to spring when things get warm and so forth. So autumn is the fall. What is the relationship with regard to Atem having to do with the fall? In the text of Ra and Aset, that they call Ra and Isis and so forth, Ra states that I am Khepri in the morning, Ra at noon, and Atem in the evening. The beetle-headed divinity is Khepri, that's the morning sunrise and so forth. Ra with his ram-headed, form with the solar disk on his head. At noon, the fiery energy and so forth, radiant energy. And this is the deity Atem. And you see Khepri and Atem praising Ra. He's in the middle. This is Khepri in the morning, Ra in the noon, and Atem in the evening and so forth. And you can see, if you look closely, the name Atem spelled out. It says the Aten setting, or the sun setting upon the mountains at sunset in the evening is akin to a seed being planted in the ground. This is an image from ancient Kemet of the red. Sometimes the sun looks like a red disc setting in the, in the west, and in the Kemet it was set between the mountain range in the west, which is the Menu, the mountain range, and so forth. So when the sun begins to set, you see this red disc setting in the west. It goes down through the mountains and then goes into the underworld and so forth. Atem, the spiritual force Atem, is operating through that red setting sun. The sun is falling, Atem falling, Atum, autumn falling, about to go into the underworld and so forth, and he's in the red setting sun. The text just said he's in the evening. So that's the evening point, sunset. When you look at the name of the divinity, it's spelled Atem, Atemu, Temu, also with the D, Adem, is where they get Adam from and so forth. And then we go into some cosmology about Ad and Ademet, Ademite, and so forth, and the various related terms and so forth. But when we talk about autumn, that's the end of the solar cycle, the end of the warm period, the beginning of the cool period, the end of the full flowering of the plants and everything else, and then you begin to move into the cool period. So it's the completion of the warm cycle that went from March 21st through September 20th, 22nd. That warm part of the year. Then you get into the cool fall and winter part of the year. The warm part of the day, sunrise, when the sun breaks through the surface of the earth, that's like morning, dawning. That's sunrise, but that's also like the spring equinox of March 21st when the sun is breaking free. But that's sunrise. 1 second. Okay, but that's sunrise. But now you have sunset, you have things fall. The root of the name Atem is Temu, means all, complete, whole, entirely full. Tem, to compress, freeze, squeeze together, to join. Tem, to make an end of, to finish. Temu, hard, compact substance. In the rising sun, you have the Beta, who we're going to get into shortly. That's in the morning. That's also at the spring equinox. But the setting sun, you have a red disk, and you have the deity, the spiritual force Atem, sitting inside the red disk. The rising sun is like the explosive energy, energy exploding on the horizon and so forth. First it's dark, and then you see the rays of the sun shoot out, and it's an explosive force, and it shoots across the landscape and so forth. When the sun is, up in the sky, noon and so forth, it's the most radiant aspect of it. It's not as radiant when it's rising, but it gets more radiant and fiery and hotter and so forth, quote unquote, with our respective to us on Earth at noon. And then it begins to cool down and, contract this power and so forth when it sets. So you have that explosive power, that radiant power, and then that contractive power, that consuming fire, the explosive fire, radiant fire, consuming fire. Khepra, explosive fire, sunrise, Ra, radiant fire, Atem, consuming fire, consuming burning fire, like coal burning out. Here's an image, an actual image of a red setting sun. So when they talk about, go back up a little bit. Okay, we say in our ancient cosmology, as a matter of fact, it says here, "Oh, Atem, Atem Khepra, you came high on the height. You rose up as the Ben stone in the mansion of the Benu bird at Anu. You spat out Shu, you spat out Tefnut, and you set your arms about them as arms of a Kaso, that your essence might be in them." That's from the mirror text, the pyramid text. So they're talking about how in the form of a Benu bird, he sat on the primordial stone. Let's give you an image of that as well so you can see. The black capstone of pyramids represents the primordial earth that rose up out of the primordial ocean at the beginning of the world. This is the Benu bird of Atem. So his animal totem is the Benu bird. And here he's sitting on the little primordial little pyramidion capstone in quote unquote real life that represents this Benu bird sitting on, the stone. So in ancient Kemet, the waters would flood the entire land for a number of months and so forth. And then when the waters began to recede, the black earth was deposited along the banks of the river, and people would go out and till the soil because it didn't really rain in ancient Kemet. But when the water began to recede, the highlands, those are the peaks that would be the first thing that would stick up out of the water. So you have water covering the entire area, just like this hurricane, and things are underwater and so forth. But the highest lands, the hills or mountains, they're sticking up, but the rest, everything else is underwater. In ancient Kemet, when the waters would flood the land, only the highlands, once the water begins to recede, those peaks would be the first thing that stuck up out of the water. And the Benu birds would fly across the sky, and they will land on those primordial mounds, because that's the only place whereupon they could stand, because everything else was underwater. In the cosmology of ancient Kemet, they talk about the beginning of creation, and the entire earth was underwater. And then Ra and Ra caused a portion of the earth's surface to explode above the water and so forth. That was the first mound, and that was the first landmass, and that was the beginning, the establishment of the world and so forth. And the great Benu bird of Atem sat on that primordial mound and began to create, along with his wife Atemet. And that same thing happens every year in Kemet when the waters flood the land. It looks like the whole land is flooded. It looks like the primordial times when there's nothing in existence. Then the waters begin to recede, and all of a sudden a mound shows up, the first landmass, the only landmass on Earth. And then the sacred bird comes and lands on the mound. Cosmologically, on the solar aspect, when the sun sails across the sky and then sets in the mountain range on the west, that's like the bird flying across the sky and then setting on that primordial mound, and that energy penetrates the mound. When the sun goes into the earth and penetrates the mound, that is conception, and it gives vitality to that landmass. When the first landmass, like this one, broke through the surface of the water, then the energy of the deity Atem operating through the setting sun penetrated the mound. There was a fusion, the female divinity within the mound which is this divinity right here. Asaase Nebet, who is also called Atemet. She's the wife of Atem. So Atem and Atemet, they fuse together. That's solar energy penetrating the primordial earth mother, the fertile earth mother, and so forth. Asaase Tepet. And then you have Asaase Pet, who's the barren earth mother, but Asaase Tepet is the fertile earth mother, that is Atemit. Atem and Atemet fuse together. The primordial earth, it becomes vitalized, just like a man and woman copulating and so forth. And then, you know, a fertile land is manifest, and you can have plant life and mineral life, and eventually human life, animal life, and human life, and so forth. So that's what's taking place in the cosmology. So when they talk about the sun setting, that's fall. Autumn, or Atem, that's fall, that's conception, that's quote unquote copulation, conception, and so forth. It's the harvest time, but also the seeding time. I want to show another image of that female divinity real quick. Actually, let me give you a better image of that we posted before. Oh, just give me a second. I just need to. Okay, so that's one of the, we're going to get to Khepri and Kheprit, but I just wanted to pull that down real quick. Okay, so this particular image right here, we have them in two different places. So you have Atem, this is Atem once again. And this is Asaase Tepet, and this is Asaase Pet. So one of them is the wife of Atem, one of them is the wife of Khepri. I need to plug in my computer real quick. One second. It's not, okay. The reason why we have these two divinities here, sometimes you see them seated this way. This is Atem. This is asaase nebet tepet, which is also Atemit, which we just saw. We're going to show that again. And this is asaase nebet pet. In Akan, this is asaase afu and asaase, the fertile earth mother and the barren earth mother. The barren earth mother is the one that receives corpses and so forth, deals with justice and adjudicating matters in the ancestral realm. And then you have the fertile earth mother where we plant seeds and so forth for crops. Here they are standing together, asaase nebet tepet and asaase nebet pet. The wife of asaase nebet tepet is Atem. The wife of asaase nebet pet is Khepri, and so forth. We showed them in this particular image together to show that the twin earth mother divinities, asaase nebet tepet and asaase nebet pet, are the same asaase afu and asaase Akan. Asaase Yah and Akan, showing that the earth mother divinities existed in ancient Kemet under the same names asaase. So this is the reason we had, showed this particular image of them like this. But they're shown in different ways. Sometimes they're seated together, sometimes they're not. But so the key is Atem means to come to an end, to complete, to finish, to bring an end to, and so forth. When the sun sets in the west, that's the end of the day and everything goes dark. And then the sun goes into the underworld. When the sun sets, quote unquote, in the evening point of the year, which is September, is the end of the warm cycle. Then you go down into the cool, dark cycle and so forth. So this is why Atem has to do with the fall. Atem and Atemet. And once again, we go back to our document. That was Atem and Atemet. Now, let's go back to the Atem online. If you look at the term for winter, and they will talk about the English winter. Ultimately, they'll talk about German and Proto-Germanic and all of that. They say probably, literally, the wet season from the Proto-Indo-European term wend, as you can see here, W-E-N-D, nasalized from the root wed. So wed becomes wend with the nasal end placed in between the E and D and so forth. So they'll say wend comes from wed, and then later wetter and water and wet and so forth. So wet, wetter, water, wind, and so forth. They said on another old guess, cognate with the Gaulish vindo, Old Irish find, and white and so forth, and dime. They're guessing about the origin of the terms that they use. But winter, went, wed, and so forth. When you look at wed, they say is the root of these various terms, including wet, winter, water, wash, vodka, which is vodka, and so forth, and undine and undulate, and undulation, and so forth. But you'll notice the U and the W, they will interchange the U and W. You'll find the same thing in our ancestral languages. In ancient Kemet, the symbol for the U is the chick, but it's also the W. But you'll have terms, for example, in European languages, Sweden is spelled S-W-E-D-E-N, Sweden, but some of them will pronounce it Sweden with a V. They'll say William, but some will pronounce it William or Wilhelm. The V and W interchange. The same is true in our ancestral languages, and this is where that interchange comes from. When you look at the U, and you look at the W, and you look at the V, you have the V that was a character over 2,000 years ago or whatever, about 1,500 years ago. It transformed into the U, And then hundreds of years after that, the U transformed into the double U, which is two U's side by side, double U, or two V's side by side. A W is two V's side by side. So you have William, you have William, you have Sweden, you have Sweden. The U and W interchange. And you find that interchange originally, not with European languages, but in our languages. So for example, the Ewe people in Togo and Benin and parts of Ghana, they will call their language Ewe, E-W-E, but some will say Ewe, E-V-E, so either Ewe or Ewe. When you look at the Ovambo people in Namibia, and let's look at that real quick. And we can see the evidence of the interchange here. Ovambo people, a Bantu ethnic group native to South Africa, primarily modern Namibia. Ovambo, also pronounced Awambo. So you see the V and the W interchange once again. So that interchange comes from our languages before Europeans existed on Earth. This is why you'll see the interchange between wet, wed, as well as ved and vad and vakan, and the U undulation, und and wound and boon, ed and wed and bed and so forth. This is where you get that. So when we go to our document, the term word is pronounced or written U-R-T, and it's really a D sound. But typically, Europeans and the way the language is transliterated today, this is an older dictionary, instead of using a U for the little bird and so forth, they will use a W. So it will be word, 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 that W-E-D, wed, which became wood, and wood and vod, like vodka, and so forth. Wed or wood comes from word, which later becomes werd in European languages. So wed becomes wood. Well, it originated as word. It became wed and wed later in European languages, and wedter and wedder and wedder and winter and so forth in English. But you saw it went from was winter to wind and wed and wod and vod, like vodka and all of that. But that word comes from word in ancient Khmer. What does word mean? The little swallow bird and the little glyph of the open mouth is the word, and the palm with the open, the hand with the open palm is the D sound, so that's word. And it means to rest, be motionless. The setting of a star, immobility, cessation. Then it says the motionless God, Urt, the motionless divinity. That is a title of Asar. Now, let's look at this real quick. Now, word becoming wed and wetter and winder and winter and so forth. That is the winter solstice. What is the winter solstice? In fact, what does solstice mean? If you look at the term solstice, the time or date twice each year which the sun reaches its maximum or minimum declination marked by the longest and shortest days. Winter solstice takes place around December 2021 is going to be December 21st. Now, the term sol is a Latin term for sun, and stis means to stand. So the sun stands, and the sun stands still. So when you look at, the summertime, 15 hours of darkness, light, 9 hours of darkness. As you get closer to the fall, you have less and less light every day till you get to the evening point, which is the equal nights, equinox, fall equinox, 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of darkness, equal nights, equinox, that is the fall. And then you start losing more light every day until you get to the winter solstice, December 21st, 15 hours of darkness, 9 hours of light. And around September 21st, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, around that time, the sun is standing still. And then around December 25th, you start to have an increase of sunlight about a minute or more per day. December 26th and then 27th, 28th, you start getting 10 minutes, 11 minutes, 12 extra minutes, 13, 20. By the time you get to March 21st or March 20th, you have, instead of 15 hours of darkness and 9 hours of light, you have 12 hours of darkness and 12 hours of light, equal nights, the spring equinox, equal nights, the balance of light and darkness. So around December 25th, the sun's light is born. So that means when they talk about God's son is born on December 25th, the light of the world and so forth, every December 25th, God's son is born, and they stole that, of course, from ancient Khepri and Kheprit, talking about the solstice, but the sun standing still. The greatest constellation in the wintertime is the constellation of Orion, which is the constellation of Asar, and then in connection with Asaase. So let's look at that real quick. And what you have here in the temple of Seti in Abju, in so-called Abydos, you have Asar and Aset. So when you talk about Asar and Aset, in their stellar aspect, they're operating through the star system Sa, which is Orion, the most dominant constellation in the wintertime and so forth. And Aset operates through the star system Sapatit or Sirius. But of course, Asar is the one who's called Urtu, Urtu, Urt, meaning motionless, cessation, to stop, to stand still. During the time of the winter, including the winter solstice, that's when the mysteries of Asar and the rituals of the resurrection of Asar take place in Kemet, in the temple of Dendera in Kemet. There's a series of very complex rituals associated with the resurrection of Asar. And that is around the time of the winter solstice. So when the sun stops, Urdu Ab, and let's look at that text once again. Urti Hat, meaning a still heart, a title of Osiris, meaning a title of Asar, to rest, to be motionless. The setting of a star, immobility, cessation, that is the solstice. The sun is standing still. December 21st, the dark time of the year, the sun is in the underworld and so forth. It's akin to midnight, the deepest, darkest time of the day and so forth. That is when the stillness happens. The sun is standing still, the stillness of the heart and so forth, deep within the darkness, even ritually meditation going deep within the darkness, going under and so forth. That's the Urt, slowing down of the heart and so forth. But then there's a resurrection that occurs. So when Asar dies and then he's resurrected and so forth, the resurrection comes later. But, second. That Urt, which became Urt and wood and wedder and winter and all of that, that comes directly from the cessation, the immobility, the stopping or standing still of the sun for a certain period, and then the resurrection. And just so you can see that resurrection, let's pull that up real quick, which is also in the temple of Seti and so forth. And we post this at least, every year around that time, just so people can see what's going on. So you see the Jed pillar here, and you see the solar disk, and you see Wachet and Nekabet inside the solar disk, the two serpents inside the solar disk. That is representative of the backbone, but the spirit of Alsar is in the Jed pillar. And when they write the pillar up, it was laying down, and then they write the pillar up. They're raising the pillar up and calling the raising of the Jed pillar. The spirit of Alsar is in that sacred talisman, that sacred shrine. So when they raise the pillar up, that is representative of Alsar, who was deceased, Urtu, Ab, in the darkness, the coldness, deep within the earth and all of that, the blackness, the winter, the darkness, the immobility, the cessation, Urt, Ab, the cessation, Urt, of the Ab, of the heart and so forth. Then he's resurrected, he's pulled up and resurrected, his spirit is resurrected, and then he goes into the heavenly realm and so forth. His spirit is operating through the Jed pillar, and then he's resurrected. And in this scene, he's resurrected, and you see that they have dressed and put the sacred clothing and wrappings around the pillar. These are representative of two feathers on top of the pillar, and then this is representative of the solar disk. So when they resurrect the Jed pillar, and then they wrap the Jed pillar, and they put the radiant disk on top of the Jed pillar and so forth, all around December, when we're talking about the resurrection of Alsar, after he died around the solstice and light began to come to the world again, once again, and so forth. That's akin to the Christmas tree, which is a pillar that's raised up into position around December 25th. And there's a star placed on top of the Christmas tree. That is the solar disk placed on top of the tree and so forth. And then when you see the two serpents, if we were to zoom in, there are two serpent divinities, Wachet and Nekabet, inside the solar disk, representing the lunar and solar energy. And the lunar energy is silver, and the solar energy is golden and so forth. So when you see garlands of silver and gold wrapped around the tree, that's the sacred serpents of Wachet and Nekabet wrapped around the tree, the solar and lunar light, the golden and silver, garland wrapped around the tree and getting up to the top, which is the solar disk. And the same thing with the two energy serpents moving up the spine and illuminating the third eye region, as well as the kara kara at the top, the crown kara kara, so-called chakra and so forth. But we always show that just to show that resurrection of the Jed pillar, Alsar's spirit is inside the Jed pillar, and Aset is participating in that resurrection. That is happening at the Urt and Urtu. These are titles of Alsar and Aset in the deep, dark wintertime, with the deep recesses of consciousness. We go deep down to purify ourselves, mummify ourselves. You mummify yourself, you make yourself impervious to decay. So when you're mummified, just like if you go to Kemet and you see mummies and the bodies are wrapped, these bodies have been preserved for 5,000 years because of that mummification process. When you mummify your spirit body, you make your spirit body protected. So other entities, people's thoughts, projections, ritual projections can't control you. You're in control. You have self-mastery and so forth because you've mummified yourself. Once you go into the deep darkness, you mummify yourself, you purify yourself, and then you resurrect. He's resurrected, he's wrapped up, he's mummified. So sometimes they show him as a mummified divinity who's resurrected. Sometimes they show him spirit operating through the Jed pillar. Sure. So yeah, so you'll see, for example, in this picture, it's mummified. He has the nkaka and the, which is the so-called flail and the heka and so forth, the shepherd's crook. And then this is Set, misnomer Isis and Osiris and so forth, but mummified. So sometimes he's, just shown as mummified. Sometimes he's inside that pillar, which represents the backbones of stability. But when we resurrect, purify ourselves, make ourselves impervious to decay by mummifying ourselves, protecting ourselves, then we resurrect and so forth, and we can go into the world purified, resurrected, and protected. When you engage in ritual practice and you pour libation, and then you go into the spirit realm, you stop focusing on the physical world, and you go into the spirit realm, deep into the darkness and so forth, but you purify yourself, you mummify yourself, like Al-Sar did and Al-Set participated in that, then you're protected. Just like those mummies, little maggots and other things have not been able to penetrate those wrappings and destroy those bodies of those mummies for 5,000 years. So when you mummify yourself ritually, purify yourself ritually, and protect yourself ritually, you can go into the spirit realm, gain access to divine wisdom, incorporate that, come resurrect out of the spirit realm, and use the knowledge you gained when you were in the spirit realm to better your existence. So that's what the Urtu, cessation, immobility, and all of that has to do with the winter solstice, sun standing still, and that's what's going on. That's the origin of the term. Now, and we want to go through the origins of the terms first because this is information that nobody has, but it's directly related to deities. And let me, in fact, before we go to that part, you see Urhat, still heart, and so forth, to rest, to be motionless, and all of that. But you also have Urt, the funeral mountain, the grave. Urt, a name of the other world. So that is when we talk about the funeral mountain, the land of the west, when the sun sets in the west, that's the funerary mountain, and then it goes down into the darkness. When it sets and hits the horizon, that's the evening point. Equinox, that's the evening, like 6 p.m. There's also the equinox around fall. But then when it goes deep down in the darkness, now you're in the quote unquote grave and so forth. You're deep down, 6 feet deep or whatever. You're in the other world. So you have Urt, meaning motionless cessation deep within the darkness, but Urt, also the name of the other world. But just so we don't assume that the death is final, let's just pull up our document right quick. That death and purification in our ancestral cosmology is the precursor to resurrection. So in one of our documents, we talk about a title of Osiris Tam Ur, meaning the great black one. Kamet Urt is a title of Set, And here once again, you have Ur and Urt, a title of Set. So when you see the ships of enslavement, Kam Ur, the great Ur, black Kam nation, was placed in a coffin and thrown into the water. In ancient Kemetic cosmology talks about Asar, the great black one, Kam Ur, was placed in a coffin and thrown in the water. And then when his body was found, it was cut up into a number of different pieces and scattered. When our bodies were found in these coffins, then we were cut up into a number of different pieces and sold to different plantations and so forth. But eventually, Set and eventually Nebuchadnezzar and Heru and so forth pull the pieces back together. But first, Set finds Sar, pulls the pieces together, and unites her spirit with his. So we go through that cosmology here. And just like Sar was thrown into a coffin, the great black nation, Kam Ur, was thrown into coffins, sent across the waters and so forth. The red ones, the purported followers of Set and so forth, found the body of Sar. Set's followers found the body of Sar, split, cut it up and distributed it across the land and so forth. But eventually those pieces were found, put back together. Sar is mummified, purified, protected, resurrected. Heru is born from Sar and so forth, and Set, and then takes back over the rule of the world and so forth and reestablishes order. And Sar rules from the spirit realm, but Heru rules from the upper realm. But when you see the great black body wrapped up in cotton, of course, for us, the great black nation was, a dead, quote unquote, dead nation wrapped up in cotton fields for a couple of hundred years and so forth. But that was the precursor to resurrection, because we had revolutionaries who were born, waged war against the whites in Alice Springs, killed them like Nat Turner and others, set up independent sovereign nations in swamps like Dismal Swamp in Virginia and so forth in North Carolina. The Gullah Wars and so forth that forced the Civil War to happen and then forced the end of enslavement because our people were fighting. So even though we were a great black nation, was laid out, but it was preserved in cotton, just like this great black body was laid out, preserved in white cotton bandages and so forth. But then there was the precursor of potential for resurrection, and that's what actually took place. And this is why you see the mummified body of Sar, you see grains growing out of the body, meaning the death is the precursor to resurrection when you purify yourself. But the reason why we had that in there is because one of the meanings of Ur is great, and Urit or Urat is a feminine term for great. So once again, you have Ur and Urdu, Sar and Set, dealing with the death and resurrection of the black nation. That's also ritually the mini death. When you go into the spirit realm, ritually you pour libation, engage in spirit possession, spirit communication. You go into the underworld, you go into the darkness, deep within the darkness, you mummify yourself, purify yourself, protect yourself so that you can grasp what you need from the spirit realm and resurrect and come back out of that ritual space more illuminated, more empowered, more focused, more disciplined, more guided, and healed, and having the capacity to do that for other people in our community. So once again, Ur and Urt, titles of Sar and Set, and that's dealing with, in the year cycle, that winter solstice aspect. Now we get to spring. What do they have to say about spring? To leap, burst forth, fly up, spread, grow. And they have springen, and from the Proto-Indo-European root, sprang, nasalized from the root sperek or sepereg, to move, hasten, or spring. So spring coming from sprang and sprek. Now, but they always leave it at the Proto-Indo-European root because they don't want to admit the fact that these terms were stolen from our language. They talked about to fly up, to spring up, and so forth. So you have the beetle, Khepri, Khepra, Khepri. That's the male divinity. But you also have Kheprit, the female divinity. Many people don't focus on Kheprit. They'll see Khepra or Khepri or Khepra, and they say that's the beetle-headed divinity, and he's pushing the sun across the sky and so forth. But Kheprit is the female divinity, and that is Asaase Nebipet. Kheprit, when you look at the dark circle medut or hieroglyph, in the Coptic dialect, it's the sh sound. In the older dialect, it's the ka sound. So keper, or kepri, keperi, or kepri. In Coptic becomes shepri, or sepri, sepri. And of course, sepri is sepring, sepring or spring. And what are we talking about with regard to Khepri or Shepri or Sepri or Sepring or Sepring and so forth? When they steal terms, they know what the terms sort of sound like and a general definition, but they don't know why these terms have these definitions. And in the second part of our book, this particular book was simply showing that Tritrian Pong and Akan is Khepri and Atemet. So we spend a lot of time proving that, but we still talk about the cosmology in general. Hold on one second. Okay, so we showed before that Khepri, and first let's go real quick to so we show Khepri as a male. Very often he's shown as a beetle, with the head of a beetle. In this representation from the temple of Seti and Abdu, so-called Abydos, you'll see Khepri, the body of a man, head of a man, the solar disk, and the beetle inside of the solar disk. So Kheper or Kheperi is the male divinity. And then Asaase Nebipet is also called Kheprit. Sometimes she has a solar disk on her head with the two horns, as you can see here. Sometimes she has the beetle, the scarab beetle. And let's just give a real quick proof of that, just so you can see that information if you haven't seen it before. As a matter of fact, so let me just find the little piece. And we have some references for that as well. Okay, so they'll spell it with an I, even though the actual glyph is the reed, which is the ah sound. So it's not usaset, it's saset. And we know how to pronounce it because we still use that term every day in Akan. It's not simply saset, it's asaase, asaase. So asaase, in this context, asaase Ya, one of the twin earth mother divinities, but asaase is a primordial goddess in ancient Egyptian religion. Asaase, they think that she was connected to Atem, but there are two asaases, and they didn't know. Sometimes they thought that those two asaase goddesses that we're about to look at were the one and the same. and they assumed it was the same divinity, but then some of them understood that there were two different deities. So, in fact, it says right here, the name asaase means something resembling she who grows as she comes, and Nebet Tepet means lady of the field of offerings. So the Egyptologist Stephen Quirk suggests that they represented two aspects of creation. So it says the earliest texts to mention them seem to treat Asaase and Nebet Tepet as two names for a single goddess, but after the time of the Middle Kingdom, they were treated as separate, although similar deities. So they don't know the difference between the two, but we know that they are two distinct divinities. But depicted as a woman with a scarab beetle on her head. Very often she has the solar disc on her head and the horns, but sometimes she has the scarab beetle. When she has the scarab beetle, the term for scarab, Kereb in Coptic, is Kheprit. So she is Kheprit when she has the scarab beetle on her head, the female counterpart to Khepr, the male divinity of the beetle. Let me just make sure you can see that. Okay, so sometimes she has the solar disc in the horns, similar to Heru and so forth. But sometimes, as you just saw, she has the scarab beetle on her head, and therefore skeret, where you get Khepr, Kheprit. She's Kheprit with the scarab beetle, the female beetle, and Khepr or Khepra, Khepri is the male beetle. Now, so we talked about Khepra or Khepri. In Coptic, it became Kopa in its solar boated sunrise, and we talked about Atem, the solar boated sunset. So the explosive energy of the rising sun, that is sunrise, but that's also the sun coming up from the horizon, breaking through the surface. So the evening point of the night and the day and so forth breaks through the surface and springs up. That's also akin to the spring when you're going from 15 hours of darkness, 9 hours of sunlight, and winter, Urdu. And then by the time you get to March 19th or March 20th, you have 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of darkness, equal nights or equinox. And then the sun springs up and gets more powerful every day until you have the summer solstice. So that's the explosive power. We say at dawn, the Aten, the sun rises with Khepra. At noon, the spirit force of Ra and Ra'at utilizes the Aten to radiate its light, heat, and vitality to its greatest extent to all created entities. In the evening, Atem within the sun enters asaase, earth, and goes into the underworld and so forth. Now, Khepra, the beetle, is shown pushing the sun in the solar boat up above the horizon and up into the sky. Why do they show a beetle pushing the sun up into the sky? This is another representation of Khepra, the body of a man, the head of a beetle. Because the dung beetle actually uses his hind legs, is standing on his forelegs, and uses his hind legs and pushes a ball of dung across the landscape. That's what they do. So the symbolism of the dung beetle, the great dung beetle, pushing the ball of fire across the sky is the same as the dung beetle on Earth that you observe pushing the ball of dung across the landscape. Why do they do that? And then we show the names of the divinity and so forth, and the Medusa and all of that. We also show the term Kadep in Coptic. The late Kemet dialect is Khereb. The X is a She sound, so Khereb. That becomes the English scarab or scarab beetle, but it comes from Khereb and Kadep and so forth. In that portion, we were just talking about why in Akan it means the same thing. So And we showed in the Akan dictionary the term achere, a beetle similar to tepereo. So one of the terms for beetle in Akan is chere. And we were making the connection because his name in Akan is Chere Driampong. And chere means to draw, pull, or drag. And chere means to lean upon and so forth. So when they call him Tredriampong, it means the great beetle who pulls or drags, tre, leans upon chere, the Oriya, the sun. That's literally what the name means in Akan, and it's the same Tredriampong, meaning the great beetle who drags the sun across the sky in Akan, is the same as chere, Ra in ancient Khmer, or Khepra, the great beetle who pushes the sun across the sky. The exact same cosmology in both languages and culture. But after the dung beetle drives the dung ball across the landscape, the ball is buried. The male and female then go underground and mate. The female lays her egg in the ball of dung. The ball thus carries the new life that will ultimately spring forth from the ball. When the beetle, Kerer, pushes the sun across the sky, he buries it sunset in the western horizon. Just like the dung beetle pushes the ball of dung across the landscape and buries it in a hole. Then the two beetles mate and the eggs are placed in the dung. When the great beetle pushes the sun across the sky and it's buried in the west and goes into the underworld and so forth, the boat of the sun thus goes underground for fertilization, regeneration. So then fertilization takes place. This is Atem and Atemet. The conception took place, fertilization takes place. This is happening in the underworld. Just like when a seed is planted in the ground, for a while you don't see anything. But germination is happening, rooting is happening. The roots are going deep down, grabbing nutrients from the soil and so forth, and developing buds and so forth. All of this is happening underground in the darkness. And then all of a sudden, later on, something breaks through the surface. It bursts through the surface. Sprouts happen. And when you see the sprouts burst through the surface of the soil, that's evidence of what was taking place in the underworld. At sunrise, the life within the sun is reborn. The sun springs up from the darkness. At spring, March 21st, which is akin to the sunrise of the year, the solar energy expands. The female form of the great beetle is Kheprit. One form of this divinity is asaase nebepet, as we just saw, who wears the beetle upon her head and so forth. Dung beetles are known for being able to navigate by using polarized patterns of moonlight. They have also been found to be able to use the Milky Way, the cluster of stars that we call Hap-Ur, the great Happy in the sky, the great heavenly Nile. They use the cluster of stars called the Milky Way to navigate, the only insect known to have this ability. It demonstrates their heavenly connection to the Aten, the sun, and other stars and so forth. So the dung beetle not only buries the ball of dung, the two male and female beetles mate, place their eggs within that ball of dung, that fertile energy and so forth, and eventually is born at sunrise. The great beetle pushes the sun across the sky, is buried in the west, Atem and Atemet. They mate and generate that energy, and eventually that solar disk is born once again in the spring and so forth. That's what's taking place. So Khepri, or Shepri, or Seperi, or Sepering, or spring and so forth, is the great one that's pushed up, rising up, thrusted up and so forth. Once again, spring, as it says here, to leap, burst forth, fly up, spread, grow. Why do the combination of the sound sepering mean to leap, burst forth, fly up, spread or grow? Why doesn't bu mean to leap forth, or za mean to leap forth, to fly up or spread or grow? Why is it sepering? The Europeans can't tell you why the sound sepere mean to leap, burst forth, or fly up, because they don't have the cosmology or the deities that represent that. They stole the term from our people. But we know that Khepri or Khepri and Kheprit, Kheprit in Coptic, are the beetles that literally fly up, spring up, push the sun up into the sky to bring that radiation, that power, that explosive force for our illumination and our vitality. When the sun rises, at first it was dark. When it bursts forth, it illuminates the landscape so you can navigate your way, so you can find your way, find your path, and so forth. You're no longer in darkness. And the fire gives you vitality and energy. So you become illuminated and you become empowered. That's what Khepra and Kheprit do, those spiritual forces within your body, within your spirit body. They illuminate you, empower you with their explosive fire. Now, and the final one, as far as the etymology, term summer. Hot season of the year, Old English, sumor, Proto-Germanic, sumra, Norse, Old High German, sumar, Proto-Indo-European root, sim, sm, source also of the Sanskrit, sama. So, Old Irish, sam, so sm, whether it's sim or sam, sama, and so forth, is the origin of the term summer. But they don't know why it's the origin of that term, because they stole the term once again. Look in our document. They said sem or sam means summer. Shemu, Coptic, is the late period dialect, the last version of the language that was spoken in Kemet in the late period. The Coptic dialect, Shemu, is sham, sham, and this is why you get sam and sama in Sanskrit in India, and sim in Proto-Indo-European, and simu and simra later and later summer, but it's sim, but it's shemu, which became sham and shamer and shamur and so forth. But the root is shem. It says the god of summer. The root shem, to be or become hot. You also have shem, to inundate, the summer inundation, the season of summer, talking about the hot water and so forth, and that period of the year in ancient Kemet. But you also have Shema, which means south, the country of the south, the origin of the people coming from the south and coming up. And that south is ancient Khanit, Nubia, Sudan, the desert. If you drive from Kemet, and you'll see, lush green, trees and everything on both sides, but then you also see the desert and so forth. Then when you start getting close to Nubia, then on both sides of the road is nothing but desert and mountain ranges and so forth. Desert on both sides, and you can drive for hours, and you're just driving through nothing but desert. You're going further south, it becomes hotter and hotter, and deep within the desert and so forth. Shema, south, the country of the south. Shemite, one of the Urei on the brow of Ra, Shemite, the goddess of the south. Shemau, plural, gods of the south. But Shem, meaning to be or become hot. Now, that's a title with regard to the cycle of the equinox and solstices, the male and female divinity. So we saw Atem and Atemet, which is Atem and Atemet, governing autumn. Atem, Atemet, autumn. Then we saw Urtu, titles of Alsara and Alset, deep within the darkness, Urt becoming Wurt and Wert and Wed and wet winter and so forth, winter. But that's the winter solstice, Asar and Aset, deep within the darkness, death and resurrection. The seeds germinating, roots going deep down in the black soil to grab some water and nutrients deep within the black soil, all happening in the darkness. But then you get to the spring, Sepering or Shepering or Sheperit or Keperit, Khepri and Kheprit, the male and female divinity springing up into the sky and so forth. Then you get Shemu and Shemut, dealing with hot, fiery energy. But these are titles, hot, fire to become hot, fiery, summer solstice, hottest time of the year, 15 hours of sunlight, 9 hours of darkness and so forth. Fiery male and female divinities also dealing with hot, and you see the water and so forth. Who are these male and female deities that we're talking about? And let's pull up real quick our book on the origin of the term yoga, Karakasa, origin and nature of the chakra, free download and so forth. And we did a revision back in November. We published the book back in 2013, so-called 2013 and so forth. Oh, sorry, 2014, so-called 2014. But this past November, we did it was actually finished in December. We did a revision. We expanded by a number of pages and so forth. And you can download this book for free. So we proved that the term yoga comes from the term ankh or yonk, became yoke and so forth. Kara is the origin of the term chakra. But there's a little portion. And actually, we even show Khepri and Kheprit here in this book as well. Here she is, asaase, also called Khepri and Kheprit and so forth. And I believe that we put this particular article back here if we didn't in the other. Okay, no, so it's not in this one. So it's in the other. Okay, so one of our publications, we were showing that Shu and Tefnut, this is Shu and Tefnut. And then you have Sekhmet, are actually Shiva, Kali, and Durga. A lot of people were assuming that Kali was Sekhmet and they were making up all these false associations with Kali and Sekhmet, which is totally false because they didn't know who these deities are. So we addressed it, but in the context of addressing it, we talk about Shu and Tefnut. And Shu and Tefnut, husband and wife and so forth, you see her with the fiery solar disc and the serpent on the head, and he has the feather on his head and so forth. The feather that fans the flames of fire. It's like if you have fire, you fan the flames and it gets bigger and so forth. Shu and Tefnut are also called Shu-Ti, meaning the two or the dual Ti, Shu. Shu-Ti, you see the male deity with the beard seated, the female divinity, showing that's the male and female divinity, Shu and Tefnut. Here we talk about linguistically the letters W, V, and U interchange. We talked about that already. That's why Shu becomes Shuv or Shuva and Shiva. That's where they get Shiva and so forth from. We went into a little bit of detail just to show that they stole that from our culture. But we say Shu and Tefnut govern expansion and contraction in the air and breathing. They can be found in your lungs. They are inside of the fire, Shu also means fire in Kemet. And in the Akan language, Shu means fire. Shu also means feather, air represented by feather. And we also show that Ruru Ta, the two lions, Ruru Ta, the word for lion is Ru, because that's the sound that the lion makes, Ru, or roaring, but Ru. So the Ruru Ta is the two or dual Ru lions, and you see these two lions, that's Shu and Teflon. They're the roarers. And Ruru Ta became Ruru Da and Rudra, and that's the title of Shiva and so forth. That's where they stole that from in Hinduism. But so we were just showing that Shu and Tefnut are Shiva and Kali and Sekhmet is Durga. But let's go to the dictionary. And it's important for to get these definitions first, and then as we go through the class, we'll be able to show, the cycles of life and how these divinities impact. But first, we needed to show each one of these 6 seasons and that there are divinities, male and female, that govern these solstices and equinoxes. So when people say, the summer solstice is coming, the winter equinox is coming, and fall equinox is coming, and that means balance, and we need to do this and do that. They never talk about Khepri and Kheprit dealing with the equinox, or Atem and Atemet, and invoking these divinities to bring that balance you're talking about for the equinox. Because they don't know that there are male and female deities that govern each one of these 4 poles. But we know about that information. It's just like people saying, well, the universe will do this and the universe will do that. And when you ask the universe something, there's a male divinity, which is Amen, called Nyame and Akan. There's a female great mother who's Amenet, the great mother, who's Nyame and Akan. It's not just the universe. When you actually know who these divinities are and you invoke them directly, you have a different experience. If you don't know who they are and you just say, well, the universe is going to do, then that's just making up something because you don't really know what's happening. And a lot of our people just, go along with what's being put forward by the whites and their offspring, and they try to, incorporate that. So. Okay, so we saw that Shemu means summer, Shem means to be hot, and so forth. But that is a title and a definition carried by these divinities that have something to do with being hot and fiery. You already saw the feather on the head of Shu that has to do with air, but it also has to do with fanning the flames. We saw the solar fiery disc on the head of Tefnut and so forth. So let's see what the root of their names, and they're also called the 2 Shu. So it says Shu, the air god, the sun god, solar disk, and so forth. His name is spelled well, first of all, in the Medutu, you'll see the little rectangular form that's a cistern of water, like a lake of water and so forth. But you see the feather and the bird with the disc with the dot in the middle represents the sun in this context. The disc with the dot in the middle and these 3 lines represent the rays of the sun. So Shu, and this right here is a brazier or a lamp with fire and smoke coming out, Shu. It also says Shem. Remember we said Shemu is fire and hot. Another word for that is Shu, fire, heat. Then you see Shu, light, the sun, daylight, solar disk, rays coming out. But you also have the feather that fans the flames and expands the heat. Shuti, light, of course, coming from fire. Then it says Shu, the air god, but also the sun god. They don't know why they're saying the sun god. They see the solar disk as part of his name. They don't understand he's fanning the flames of the fire coming from the sun, but he's not the sun god itself, but he expands that fiery energy. Then it says Shut, the consort of Shu. That's another title of Tefnut. She's called Tefnut. She's also called Shut, the female fire. Shu is the male fire, fanning the flames. Shut is the female fire. Just like you have Amen and Amenet, Asar and Aset, Ra and Ra'et. The et, the T feminizes nouns and so forth in ancient Kemet. And that passed over into English. So you have Anton, Antoinette, John, Johnette, Sean, Shawnette. The et feminizes, is a diminutive, and it feminizes the noun. That derives from ancient Kemet, where the T is concretized, it cuts off the energy and makes it into an entity. There's a whole cosmological breakdown with regard to the ta or ut, concretizing the form of fiery energy. So Shu, the male divinity, Shut, the female divinity, she's also called Tefnut. Shu, T, the dual, T or twin, Twi, Shu, the two Shu, fiery energies, the Shu and Tefnut, as we just saw. And then you also have Shui, to be dry, arid, hot. In Coptic, Shoe, and you see that dry, hot, parched fields, drought, heat. And there are a number of different, relations to that. But also, a crown ornament consisting of a pair of feathers, pinions, feathers, and so forth. So you see Shu with the feather on his head, but that feather is connected to the solar disk, fanning the flames. Then Shut, or a Tefnut, she has a solar disk on her head, surmounted by a serpent. But then there's also association with water, which we're going to get into that when we go into some detail with them. But that, when you talk about hot springs, the fiery water deep within the mantle of Earth, that fiery water, that's the water and fiery energy of Shu and Tefnut. So you have the mantle and the water within the mantle. But we're going to get into some detail about that. But when they talk about Shu and Tefnut as when they talk about Shu and Tefnut as the sun god and the sun goddess and so forth. And let's look at one of the very popular stories about Shu and Tefnut. Here's Tefnut in the form of a lioness, and she has the solar disk on her head. And this particular scene is from the story of the distant goddess. And some people assume that's talking about Sekhmet, but it's not. It's talking about Tefnut. And the story goes, Shu and Tefnut are twins, but they're also quote unquote husband and wife, fiery energy and so forth. Tefnut became enraged because of something that happened in Kemet. And then she decided to leave Kemet and go distant. She went into the south, she went into Kani, she went into Nubia, she went into the Shemite, the south, the Shemu, the south. Remember, Shemu means south, and Shemite means south and so forth. She went into the south, and when she went, she took all of the moisture with her. With that fiery energy, she just stripped the moisture out of Kemet, and everybody was suffering, and drought happened, and it was burning up and everything, and she was gone because she was upset, and she was deep within the Shemite, within the south. She was the goddess within the south at that point. Let's go back to the text. We said Shem, well, first of all, hold on 1 second. Okay, Shemu, summer. To become Shem, to become hot. The season of summer, but then we also have Shema, the south, Shemite, the Ure on the brow of Ra. And you see that cobra serpent as determinative, it represents a female deity. So there's a female divinity in the south. The Shem meaning hot, burning, and all that. So she got upset because of what took place. She left Kemet, she went into the south, deep within the south. Tefnut or Shut went into the Shema or Shemite, the south, the Shemu region, the hot region. And she went down there to the deserts and she took all the water with her. And then Ra directed Shu to go and bring his sister back. And Tahuti went along with them, the divinity of wisdom. And he guided through wisdom Shu to assist Shu into bringing Tefnut back. And when she came back, as she was coming back to the north from Nubia, from Sudan, Kanit, back into Kemet, everybody was cheering and full of merriment because as she was moving through, then the water was beginning to return. But that's the story of the distant goddess going into the Shemite. She became the Shemite, the Shemut, the feminine divinity of the south and so forth. And then she came back. That also has to do with the movement of the sun going to the south and coming back to the north and so forth. Summer solstice, winter solstice, and all of that. So, so you have these fiery divinities associated with Shemu, the summer, fire, hot, and so forth. Shu and Tefnut governing the summer solstice. Solstice, the sun standing still. So when she goes to Kanit, she goes deep within the south and so forth. And they're like, all right, she stripped all of the water. What are we going to do now? We're literally at a standstill until we can bring that fiery energy back up. And then they brought it back up, and then things started moving again, and then water started coming back. So it became super hot, but then water started coming back to the land because she brought it with her. She had that magnetic force to bring it with her and so forth. So water started coming back. So it started cooling down a little bit, getting back to a regular temperature, not overly drought and heat and parched and dead crops and people dying and everything else. She started bringing that water back, and then things started to cool down because that was the summer solstice, hottest point in the year. Sun stood still, just a whole lot of fire and energy and heat. But then the water starts coming back, cooling starts coming back, and then you start moving towards the fall. So you have Shu and Tefnut governing the summer solstice. You have Atem and Atemet governing the Shemu and Shemut, which is summer, Semu, summer and so forth. You have Atem and Atemet governing autumn. You have Urtu and Urt, Asar and Aset governing the ward or the wet or the winter and so forth. You have Khepri and Kheprit, Shepri, separating and separate and so forth, spring governing spring and so forth. You have these 4 sets of divinities. Now, what we're going to get into next week, we're going to get into the cycle. So here we were showing the relationship between the Congo symbol and the Akan symbols and symbol in ancient Kemet, and we all share the same symbol. We all have the same cosmogram in our different cultures. In the Yoruba tradition here, in the circular zodiac in ancient Kemet, the Bakongo people here, within the Akan people and these two symbols, we all have this same cosmogram that we've been using that govern the various aspects of life. So we're going to get into that. We'll show this not just the sunrise and the summer solstice, spring, summer, fall, winter, sunrise, noon, sunset, midnight, and so forth. But also you have these associations with the ritual practices, that kaolin, chalk, red ochre used for ritual practices, yellow ochre, black charcoal, and so forth in the Hoodoo tradition. Salt used, people put salt by the doorways and so forth to repel certain negative spirits and so forth. You have red pepper and sulfur and black pepper used and so forth, all in accordance with the energy of these different aspects of the cycle. We show the 4 sons of Heru and so forth, and a number of different things. So we're going to get into all of that starting next week, including the Adinkra symbols and the cymatics. But first we had to establish who governs these different equinoxes and solstices, male and female divinities. Then we can talk about how they impact every aspect of our lives. What does the solar energy of the Shemu and Shemut, Shu and Tefnut, how does that affect your body? How does that affect your life force energy? How do you align with that? How does the cooling down energy of Atem and Atemet, affect your body, affect your, spirit body and so forth, your life force energy? How do you align with that? Same thing with Asar and Aset, Urtu, Urt, and so forth. The same thing with Khepri and Kheprit across the board. So we're going to get into all of that in the next few weeks. Because this cosmogram governs every aspect of our lives every day, from sunrise to noon, sunset to midnight and back, every year, from fall, winter, spring, summer, back to fall. And we also show how it has to do with the, real quick, just so you can see what will be coming up. When we look at the cosmology of that cosmogram, which we reference as the newts. This is in one of our books, the Ojiraman book. We go into some detail showing this cosmological structure and how it's related to the unfolding of life. So seeding and germinating and rooting and sprouting and full flowering and so forth. And we talk about every aspect of the cycle: the seeding and bedding, germination, rooting, sprouting, flowering, maturation, harvesting, seeding. And how every experience you have when you come in contact with somebody, that's like a seed being planted in your awareness. You have second. So you have contact with someone. Your first contact with somebody is like a seed being planted in the ground. You experience them and so forth, or an event or entity and so forth. That's contact. That's that white circle. That's penetration and so forth. Then the black circle, germination and rooting. You start developing a certain aspect of conscious awareness about this individual or this event that just happened to you, or things that are about to take place and so forth. You start germinating and rooting these thoughts and stimulating and triggering awareness or lack of awareness about it. And then the next circle is the yellow circle, the sprouting. You have an emotional reaction based on what you've been rooting and seeding and so forth. And then you have a flowering, a maturation, you have a full expression of behavior, not just an emotional reaction, but a full expression of behavior, how you're going to address this situation, this individual, this entity, spiritually or physically. And then the final circle, going back to the white, the harvesting of the results of your actions. So everything that you experience in life goes through this cycle: seeding, germination or rooting, sprouting, flowering, and harvesting. Everything. So you need to know where you are in the cycle so you can correct behaviors, and that can be done ritually as well. So we're going to get into that. But we just had to lay the foundation tonight for who these deities are. So okay, so it's after 10, so we're going to go ahead and end it here. If you have any questions, send us an email, but we're going to open it up for questions and answers at the beginning of the session next week. For anything that you had or anything that you contemplated, once you rewatch this, we will upload this and send you the link to it later over the next day or two and so forth. You'll be able to watch it whenever you want to. You'll have the passcode for that. And if you have any questions, of course, you can, you can jot those down and then we can get to that. So, but again, yet I'll say we thank everybody for tuning in, and we will meet again. Atem.